That's a spicy meatball!
As a chef and a person who loves all kinds of food, I'm always looking for ways that I can emphasize quality over quantity without feeling like I'm missing out or depriving myself of the things that I love. And I love pasta. Carbonara, mac and cheese, primavera, cacio e pepe, you name it and I'm all about it. That's why I choose Bonza. Bonza is the pasta made from chickpeas, which means it has more protein, more fiber, and I believe more flavor than regular old pasta. Seriously, if you go in my pantry right now, there are 2 boxes in there awaiting their next culinary adventure. Bonza has over 12 different kinds of pasta, including penne, rotini, elbows, and cavatappi, which is my favorite, because all of those curves and ridges hold even more delicious sauce. Bonza also makes pizza crust, which tastes too good to believe that it comes from peas. You can find Bonza at Whole Foods, Target, and Walmart.
Why is it spicy?
Hey there, food fans. Welcome back to the Food for Thoughtcast with me, your host, Melissa Reagan. This week's episode is all about why is it spicy? What makes food spicy? Now, if you've been with me from the beginning, or maybe you joined somewhere in the middle, you know that I've done a couple of episodes on taste and flavor. We looked at those 4 to 5 basic taste components, right? Salty, sweet, bitter, acid, and then umami. Umami, I feel like, is like the Y of vowels, right? So you have A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y. So it's just like that, right? You have bitter, acid, salty, sweet, and sometimes umami in a couple of specific dishes. That's where we find those tastes. But one of the things I mentioned in the flavors episode is spicy. It's a combination of flavors. Spiciness is really a measurement of a food's pungent nature and how hot it is based on the level of capsaicin that it contains. Now, capsaicin is an enzyme. You can think of it as an oil that chilies contain that determines their level of spice. So we talked about allergens last week. Capsaicin is actually a common allergen. You can be allergic to a pepper itself, which would be like the flesh of the pepper, or you can be allergic to capsaicin in general or in total, which would mean that you are allergic to anything involving that pepper, right? Because the capsaicin is the enzyme that not only does it give the pepper its spicy flavor, but it runs through those veins. It's found in the seeds and the flesh of the pepper, and that would be any pepper that contains any level of capsaicin. So when we talk about the scale and the spectrum to which, things are determined spicier, like how we figure out what's spicier than what pepper is spicier than another, that's called the Scoville heat unit scale. And so when we talk about that, even it in modern times is a little bit antiquated, but when we talk about that, you'll see something like bell peppers at the bottom, right, with no spice. That's why sometimes you hear people call bell peppers sweet peppers. And so today I just want to talk about what makes food spicy, how can you combat things that are spicy, and how are these foods used in different kind of cuisines around the world. So capsaicin is the spicy chemical compound that's found in chilies. There's a lot of science that goes into this, right? Like the same receptors that tell your tongue, for instance, this coffee is hot, also tell you these chilies are hot. So there's not a lot of, difference between temperature hot and spicy hot. Or like when I was growing up, my mom would say, like, is it oven hot or is it spicy hot? Or is it oven hot or is it hot hot? And so there's not a lot of difference, it turns out, in the science, how your tongue and how your taste buds determine the difference between one and the other. So you can think of the heat that comes from chili peppers kind of like salt. So it's really easy to overdo it in the moment. Like you can make a dish salty specifically, right? Like you can overdo it on salt in a specific dish, but over a long term, you're not going to damage your taste buds. You might have a higher sensitivity to salt in the long run, just like you might to spice, but you're not going to do any lasting damage. And so some people can handle spice and some people really can't. And so it really depends on where the level of spiciness falls on the heat scale as to whether or not you can you can handle it for minutes or hours or days. But it won't wear out your taste buds. Because why? Because your taste buds are always changing and you're actually shedding them every so often. So you're growing new taste buds. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of like a taste bud falling off, or maybe it's just getting ready to shed. It can be a little bit painful. Sometimes I'm tempted, like, this is a little gross, right? But sometimes when a taste bud is sticking out or it's just at that moment where it's about to shed, I'm sometimes tempted to go in there with a pair of tweezers. Like, if this grosses you out, I'm super sorry. But to me, I feel like it's impeding my ability to taste foods properly. So TMI, it is what it is. You guys already know I'm quirky and weird, but yeah, I can't deal with that. As a chef, I need my tasting abilities to be top notch all the time. There's a prominent scientist in this field. His name is Dr. Paul Bosland, and he has determined that the heat profile of chili peppers really falls into 5 different categories. How hot is it? How fast does the heat come on? Like, how fast does it creep up? How long does it take you to feel that sensation of heat? You know, some things will really hit you at the tip of your tongue, right? And then some things you'll really feel as they go down. Like, you'll be like, this really hit me in the throat, or my entire mouth's on fire, right? But he's measuring this in speed. How fast does the heat come on? And then does it stay or does it dissipate quickly? Like, I like to think that Tabasco, just personally for me, right, the heat dissipates really quickly in between bites. That's why I'll shake it on every couple of bites. Like if I'm eating scrambled eggs or maybe like a baked potato, those are the kind of things that I like Tabasco sauce on. Maybe French fries in some instances. It's usually like cheese fries, but Tabasco is a really acidic heat. So I think that as long as you have other foods in the mix, like starches and carbohydrates, like a French fry, potato, eggs, like I mentioned, not really eggs so much as it's that the feeling in your mouth. Like, an egg isn't necessarily starch, but it has that kind of like fluffy feeling. So I feel like it takes that acid off the surface of your tongue faster. So it makes that heat go away faster. Whereas like if I had jalapenos chopped in eggs, I feel like that would be more longer lasting heat. And so that's exactly what he's measuring here. So how hot is it? How fast does the heat come on? Does it linger or dissipate quickly? I kind of got like all of a sudden I just wanted to sing Linger by the Cranberries, but I won't. But every time I hear that word, it just makes me think of that song. And then the fourth category is, where do you feel the heat? So like I just mentioned, do you feel this on the tip of your tongue? Do you feel it in the back of your throat? Is it maybe deeper, right? Like, is it like an aftertaste after you swallow? Is it just a sudden bead of sweat on your forehead? Like, where are you experiencing this heat? And then does the heat register as flat or sharp? So a good example for me is like a soup or a chili would be flat, right? You get a little heat at the back of each spoonful of soup or chili. And then that sharp heat, personally for me, is going to occur with things that are more acidic, like sriracha or Tabasco or like pickled jalapenos. That's that sharpness. The last characteristic, it tends to be super personal. It's kind of dependent upon what your cultural preference is. So if people are raised in like Asian cultures, chili heat is like a core flavor used in that type of cuisine. So you if you're raised in that type of culture where this is used very often, you think that's just normal. And then Americans, like, our palate tends to be a little bit on the flat side because based on where you're raised in the country, even in a place that makes spicier food, like the spicy foods, they are not all the time. So when you're talking about like Midwestern food, East Coast food, West Coast food, even Southern food, right? Like, there are little pockets of spice that you could find in each one of those cuisines, but it's not necessarily featured at every meal. You have more of like the add-on spices, right? Like you have like the peppers and vinegar that you would add to collard greens, or you have like the hot sauce or pico de gallo that you would add to like a Western style, like a tri-tip or like a regional taco, right? Or you have like the maybe chili peppers that you might consume with brisket. But what I'm getting at is if you're not eating it every day and you don't have an affinity for it, those tastes are going to really be received in a way that's sharp rather than it's considered flat, right? So if it's peppery and if you consumed it in several dishes over the course of a lifetime, it's going to taste a little bit flat. And if you're just adding it intermittently to your cuisine, or if it's not a normal part of the regional cuisine that you grew up with, it's going to be considered sharp. So there's an entire institute. It's called the Chili Pepper Institute. They're affiliated with New Mexico State University. They have this nifty device that they call a chili tasting wheel, and it kind of measures all of these 5 categories. It really helps to describe the heat and flavor profiles of a lot of different chilies. The Chili Pepper Institute offers advice on how to cook them if you live somewhere where it's not standard. I would say that a jalapeno or a poblano pepper has become pretty common in the state of Texas. If you travel to other states, they're going to be more or less common depending upon where you are in the country. In 1912, this Scoville unit scale was invented. So Wilbur Scoville invented this scale in 1912, and really the process behind inventing this scale involved extracting the capsaicinoids. So that's basically like the building blocks of this enzyme called capsaicin that makes pepper spicy. He extracted specific enzyme from each pepper that he could find, everything that was available at the time, which if you think about horticulture and how far we've come as, with crops and foods that are available and everything else, globalization, there weren't many options available at the time, or there weren't as many options available at the time as there are now. What happened is he diluted these enzymes with a solution of sugar and water. So in culinary terms, he was using a simple syrup. He measured the spiciness of each pepper or the pungency of each pepper on this scale based on the amount of sugar and water it took for the heat to no longer be tasted. So for example, that means that to no longer taste an entire cup of Tabasco sauce, the pungency of it, it would take 5 cups of water. That's basically the conversion that happens there. So on the scale itself, chilies are measured by Scoville heat units, or SHUs. Now, you might have heard this mentioned in maybe like your local wing restaurant. Maybe there's like a key or, some elements of the menu that explain this. You might have heard it on television, or maybe this is your first time hearing about it, but I think it's absolutely fascinating. This is based on levels of dilution to not taste the heat, right? So of course it's 0 at the bottom of the scale. We're starting with bell peppers, sometimes commonly called sweet peppers. There is nothing spicy about a bell pepper. Next pepper up, pepperoncinis. Almost never see these not pickled. I would argue that the acid in the preparation of these actually adds to the sharp flavor, or that 5th category of the way that you taste heat. These are 100 to 500 Scoville heat units. Next up, you have Anaheim chilies. These are widely used in Californian cuisine. I mean, it's named for Anaheim, the city, right? But these are 500 to 1,000 Scoville heat units. You often see Anaheim chilies used as a stand-in for poblanos when you're making a dish like chili relleno, which is really fitting because poblano is next up on the list at 1,000 to 2,000 Scoville heat units. And then next you have Guajillo chilies. You might have seen or heard about these in Mexican or New Mexican cuisine. The New Mexico chili also falls between the poblano and the Guajillo on the Scoville heat unit scale. So you have 2,500 to 3,000 Scoville heat units. Next up after that is jalapeno. So I like to tell people that, things like Guajillos, New Mexico chilies, ancho chilies, you're going to get more of the fruitiness. So if anybody ever remembers seeing Bobby Flay on the Food Network, or perhaps maybe even like The Main Ingredient with Bobby Flay, it aired on Lifetime, the women's channel, right? It aired long before the Food Network was even a thing. That was my first exposure to him. He had a really brilliant way of describing ancho chilies, and that is that it was like a spicy raisin. So you're going to get a fruitiness, and it's really going to offset a lot of the spice. Next up, you have Serrano chilies. You'll see these used in Mexican cuisine as well as Tex-Mex. These are going to top out at 22,000 Scoville heat units. You have Manzano chilies after that. Cayenne peppers. These are 30,000 to 50,000 Scoville heat units. That is the pepper that's used in Tabasco sauce traditionally. And then 50,000 to 100,000 is going to be your Thai chilies. Now, these are not just utilized in Thai cuisine, but you'll see them alongside things like Kung Pao chicken. You will see Thai chilies sometimes utilized in ramen. And then you have the Datil chili, which is 100,000 to 300,000 Scoville heat units. Apart from that or above that, you have 150,000 to 325, all the way up to 575,000 Scoville heat units for these two chilies, which are orange habaneros and red Savina habaneros. In here, that's where you find that Scotch bonnet classification. You're going to find these used in specialty items like wing sauces, but also in traditional jerk sauce and jerk seasonings. These peppers are fantastic. They have a little bit of peach aftertaste on the back. They have a little bit less of an acidic taste, but they have a really slow building heat that you're going to taste in the middle of your tongue and in your throat. And then after this, you have the ghost pepper, which comes in at 800,000 to 1,300 Scoville heat units. After that, you have the New Mexico scorpion, the Naga viper, all the way up to the Trinidad scorpion. There's two classifications. There's the Butch T and the Moruga. These go all the way to 2,009,231 Scoville heat units. After that, you have the Carolina Reaper, which was created in a laboratory. So each one of these above the habaneros was really man-made. They were kind of like a cross breeding, if you will, of chilies to kind of create the hottest. There's been record holders throughout the years. These were not occurring in nature before they were created in a laboratory, and now we have them. So it's kind of like if you think about something similar, like heirloom apple and tomato varieties would have been things that our ancestors ate, but then we figured out how to cross-pollinate plants. Maybe we were choosing things that grew the best in certain regions. These were specifically created to be hot. These are their purpose. At 2 to 5.3 million Scoville heat units on the scale, this is where you find standard issue police pepper spray or things like bear spray. And then 15 million to 16 million, so quite a jump. At the very top of the Scoville heat unit scale, you find something like pure capsaicin, and that's literally the enzyme that has been extracted at a laboratory level. So a couple of items on the list that you might have not had heard of. Of course, I mentioned that the Anaheims are used in chili rellenos. They're also used in tomatillo salsa. They have like a really bright green flavor, as opposed to a poblano has a little bit of a deeper flavor, right? So you find peppers like this are used in casseroles. You find them in tomatillo salsa, taco and tortilla soup. So a couple of spiciest foods around the world. I just want to mention a few things. There are chicken wings in America that are commonly called suicide wings. Trigger warning, I think that's an absolutely awful name as far as we've come as a society, but that is the name of these chicken wings. It is a mixture of chopped chilies, hot red chili sauce that most likely features cayenne chilies, pepper, which is going to be peppercorns in their natural state, just ground up or used, in the marinade, and then red chili flakes. There's a mixture of Korean, Mexican, and Chinese peppers. And kind of the point of this is we need to create the hottest, right? In America, we say bigger is better, go bigger, go home. That's kind of the idea of this. There's a lot of restaurants that have challenges that they'll have you take part in, like Buffalo Wild Wings or Pluckers, like we have in Texas. They have all sort of, atomic and super spicy wing contests. You might get a picture on the wall or a t-shirt. In Peru, there's caucao. This is a local yellow chili pepper sauce. They use this in a tripe stew. It is usually served with rice to tone down the heat a little bit. So carbohydrates are typically used to cut down heat. They will pre-cook the strips of tripe. That's intestine, in case you're not aware. I would encourage you, if you've never tasted it, it takes a little bit to get used to the texture. Like, it might not be your thing, but always be looking to expand your palate and to educate yourself just a little bit. Try all the things in life, right? Like, life's too short. It could become your new favorite. You never know. They use an ají amarillo, which is a yellow chili. Basically, it's Peruvian local yellow chili, lots of ginger and garlic. If you remember from our flavor episode, things like ginger and garlic can amplify the spice. They will serve it with cooling herbs. This is herba buena or a mint. These herbs produce a cooling sensation on the tongue. So it's just a short-term mental, feeling that your tongue is being cooled. But a lot of times this stew is considered too hot to be edible. So it's really like a show of strength and fortitude if you can handle it. Sichuan cuisine in China is considered among some of the spiciest food. The Sichuan hot pot is consumed in wintertime to improve circulation. It's so hot that it is known to cause your mouth to go numb. Sichuan features a couple of small chilies that are local to China, and then, of course, the pink Sichuan peppercorn. So every course in Sichuan cuisine is specifically cooked with the goal in mind is to not only entice your taste buds, but then also numb them. And people have reported that their taste buds can go numb for months after consuming these things. So they'll use a variety of pork, beef, mushrooms, vegetables, duck blood, pig's brain, chicken feet, soy sauce, fish sauce. If you pay attention to that list, right, you've got umami from the meat and the mushrooms. You have maybe brightness from the vegetables. You're going to have that umami flavor from the duck blood and the pig's brain. So any organ meats, really. Chicken feet, you'd have like a protein there that's going to carry that spiciness. And then soy sauce and fish sauce, you're going to get the acidity and then the saltiness from there. Everything's going to help to balance that spice. And obviously, this is something that they're going to eat that's local to the region. So everybody there is used to it. In Korea, kimchi. It is a delicacy and it's traditional. This is the cabbage dish that is fermented. A lot of people think they use vinegar, but they actually use a lactic acid fermentation, which uses salt and water to ferment this cabbage, but they use their chili paste, makes it spicy, and that acidity, it can really amplify spiciness. They're going to use things like scallions, garlic, mushrooms, tofu, more red chili paste. A lot of times they're using gochugaru or gochujang, which are traditional Korean chili paste, and then they're going to use vinegar, and they're going to stew this down. Everything in there is kind of designed to extend that spiciness. And then there's Vindaloo curry in India. So this is Goanese. And so the Goa region spent a lot of time under Portuguese rule, and they adapted their foods and taste to Portuguese cuisine styles. And so it wasn't quite spicy enough for local taste, but historically they would make red wine, garlic, and things like green peppers and pork spicier by adding green and Kashmiri red chilies. And then the warming spices that we talked about in the flavor episode, right? Cinnamon, cumin, coriander, turmeric, and then vinegar and garlic, which are two things that have that acidity that can amplify spiciness. They would use all of these flavors to make their cuisine even hotter. And then in the present day, they're using the hottest chili in the world on record, which is called Buchalokia, or the ghost chili. So that's the hottest chili in the world that's widely available. It doesn't have to be created in a lab. And then in Jamaica, of course, they're using Scotch bonnet chilies to flavor things like jerk chicken and jerk chicken wings. And then you have these jerk seasonings they'll use with like the dried variation of the chili, or they'll use that jerk marinade. It goes on all sorts of meat. They're using the warming spices again to amplify the heat of this dish: cinnamon, cloves, thyme, nutmeg, garlic, ginger, green onion. So that's your allium, your acid, and the warming spices. These are things that can make your whole body feel warmer as you eat them. And then they're going to use things like, we talked about carbohydrates, how it can really prolong the spiciness of a dish. So when you eat a carbohydrate, I want you to think about what it does to your tongue. If you eat a piece of bread, it's going to coat the inside of your mouth. It's like starchy and soft, and it has all those carbohydrates. Bananas do the same thing. So what it does, it's really like prolonging the spicy nature of that dish. It's really like stretching the spice out. In Thailand, they're using the Thai chilies, 100 to 250,000 Scoville heat units. These are the green eye chilies or the green Thai chilies. These are so hot, but also so flavorful. that Korea, China, and Japan will also commonly use this green Thai chili. And they also have a bird's eye chili there, which is the red version. And it's used in a lot of types of cuisine. It is tiny, but it packs a big punch. And then Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia are also using green chilies combined with curry powders, those warming spices again, like coriander and cumin and turmeric. And then tapioca starch. Once again, it's another carbohydrate. It's going to stretch those flavors further. And they're using like galangal ginger, which is super acidic and also hot on its own. And then the Belacan chilies, which are super duper hot. That's what they're using in their cuisine, which is otak otak. It's a grilled local cake that is super spicy and very traditional. And then they're using similar chilies, local chilies found in Ethiopia, with the same, right? They're going to use those warming spices, beef, chicken, and lamb, and then clarified butter. When we talk about what makes things spicy, also have to consider the things that cut spice. Unfortunately, fat is not one of those. So when you talk about Ethiopian cuisine, they're using clarified butter or ghee, right? Or they're using local animal fats, and it's going to stretch that spice even further. When you eat a fat, it coats the inside of your mouth. What does that do? It spreads the spice further. So there's that old, common knowledge. I wouldn't even call it a wives' tale. Let's call it like a helpful adage that says you don't put water on a grease fire in a kitchen, right? Say you're frying bacon at home in a skillet, which is probably the most unsafe way to do it. Like, let's hear it for cooking bacon in ovens. Like, everybody needs to do that. But if you're cooking something that's particularly greasy on the stove and it catches fire, what is it that you need to do? You need to use baking soda or a towel or a pot lid to snuff it out. Because what happens if you add water to that, it actually won't mix with the grease. It's just like water and oil don't mix or oil and vinegar don't mix. It actually just spreads it out, which means it could carry the fire further. The same science applies to what happens with spicy food in your mouth. If you consume carbs or oil or grease or fat along with that spice, it's just going to spread it around and help it coat your mouth, which means you could be feeling that spice in the inside of your cheek and all that like soft palate surface, right? It's just going to make it a lot worse for you, which is why drinking water doesn't help when you eat something spicy, and neither does using something like oil or fat or butter. And then finally in Bushido, that's where we get the origin of the spicy tuna roll in sushi. And so this is an extremely, spicy paste that they coat this tuna in. It's the same strategy, right? Like, they're using that carb of the rice that's in the sushi dish. It's going to spread and prolong that spicy taste. I love spicy tuna rolls, but one at a time for sure. They're delicious, but yeah, you can't eat like 4 or 5 at a time. Fresh chili peppers of every variety can be used in all sorts of ways. You can use them baked, roasted, grilled, stuffed, or raw. People always ask me how to make spicy peppers less spicy. So one of the common myths is that removing the seeds will help make them less spicy. That's simply not true. The seeds are there as a product of botany. I mean, that's how the plants, when a mommy pepper loves the daddy pepper. I'm just kidding. But the seeds are there. They're going to be naturally occurring. The ribs are where the plant really stores most of the capsaicin. And even if you remove the ribs and the seeds, in the mildest jalapeno, it's still going to have a little bit of heat. So my answer to that is determine how much heat you want in your dish. I will say the less seeds you leave in something, the less repercussions you have later on after you eat it. I'll just let you use your imagination there. But the ribs are definitely something that you want to remove to decrease the amount of heat the most. Now, as you go higher and higher on the Scoville heat unit scale, then there's really, nothing that you can do to make something less spicy. One thing you want to do is you want to remove seeds and veins and chopped peppers with gloves on. I know some people that just have zero problem doing this. The reality is, those people are very, very lucky. But what happens is if you're chopping hot peppers, that oil is spreading to your skin. Your skin is porous. It's covered in pores. Your skin is a giant organ. So whatever you get onto your skin is going to be absorbed into it. And not only that, but unless you wash it off with something that will cut through that oil, like Dawn dish soap, for example, is a really great option. Regular hand soap really might not do it. It might not have the right pH to cut through the oil of that pepper to remove it from your skin. But if it's still in your skin, you run the risk of touching different parts of your body, God forbid, rubbing a mucous membrane like your eyes or your nose. So really quick story time. I was working in a restaurant when I believe I was 19 or 20. We were going to have jalapeno cheddar grits on the menu. And I was actually wearing gloves. This is really important hygiene lesson, right? I was wearing gloves to chop jalapenos. I thought I was doing everything right. I had a sudden case of the nose itchies that only seems to come on when you're doing something really busy or with a food where you can't touch your face. And I like wiped my nose, snorted just like that, ended up getting a pepper seed sucked up into my sinus. It was some of the worst pain I had experienced, at least at that point in my lifetime. It burned really bad. My eyes not only teared up, but they started like creating mucus. I know it sounds really gross, but my body was trying to do everything it could to expel the seed from whence it came and to get it from, out from where it didn't belong. And so my brilliant self thought, well, I've always heard that you can drink milk if you eat something spicy. So I thought the next best thing to do will be I'm going to pour cold, heavy whipping cream onto a plate. Keep in mind, I wasn't even 21. I was really stupid. But I poured heavy whipping cream onto a plate and decided to close one nostril and snort it through the affected nostril. Now, this caused a bunch of sneezing. I did expel the seed. It was fine. My boss eventually walked into the women's room to find well, first of all, he was angry and he was like, where the hell have you been? What are you doing? But I think he could tell from red, bloodshot eyes, sweaty, red face, gagging over the sink. He was like, oh, something's wrong, and quickly shut the door. But he was very mad because I wasn't where I was supposed to be. The lesson, kids, is do not touch anything while you have gloves on, while you are handling hot peppers. I lived that horrible life experience and learned a great lesson so that I can be the cautionary tale so that you do not have to experience that, right? Obviously, if you get hot pepper residue of any kind on your hands, I have a couple of really great things that you can do, right? Dawn, I mentioned, is really good. It's specifically made for cutting grease. Don't believe me? They use it for when ducks get affected by oil spills. I mean, if it's good enough to wash sea lions and ducks and baby birds and seagulls in to save their lives, then it's good enough for my hands, right? And then, it's specifically made to cut grease. So it's going to cut through that oily capsaicin enzyme. And then apart from that, right, some hand soaps are not going to cut grease well enough. Not all hand soaps are created equal. There's some hand soaps out there that are basically made to smell pretty. I'm just going to say it, okay? It's the rigorous washing for enough time combined with the hot enough water that needs to be 100 degrees or more, 20 seconds. You need to sing happy birthday twice. That's what gets your hands clean. It's not necessarily the lather, right? Okay, so that lather in that soap, depending on what kind it is, can help carry that enzyme away. What's really going to protect you well is wearing gloves in the first place. You still need to wash your hands because you're probably going to come into contact with that enzyme when you take the gloves off. Then we know that water and oil do not mix, right? This is a basic science experiment. I'm sure we all saw as kids in school. Even if you didn't see it or if you didn't know it, I'm telling you now, I promise I'm not lying to you. Water and oil don't mix. So what's a gal or a guy to do, right? You can rub a little olive oil or canola oil or coconut oil, whatever you have in the way of oil or grease on your hands. It's going to join with the oil that's already there. You're going to lather as well as you can, right? 2 different oils together. But basically what you're doing is you're giving the oil a way to get off your hands, and they're going to wash it multiple times with soap and water. So the idea is that you're going to use one oil to attract another oil and get it off the surface of your skin, but you still need to wash your hands really well after that. Now, there have been some desperate times, call for desperate measures, moments in my life and my career where I realized that I've gotten hot pepper residue on my hands, not only because I can feel it there, that it's like residuey, but I can feel it's hot. Like you can get a chemical burn on your hands as well, depending on what you're using. And you will know right away if you have gotten it on your skin. Apart from the oil washing and then using soap and water, just straight soap and water as well, you could also use a different kind of fat, and that being lactose, to wash your hands. It's kind of wasteful, but in some situations, it has been my only option. So I have straight up poured half and half milk or heavy cream on my hands at a hand wash sink. I don't recommend this as the first line of defense, but hey, if it's like your third line of defense and it's all you got, go for it. Then you can combine it with a little bit of hand soap. There are a couple different options you have. Think about those grease cutting oven and stove cleaners that you see in the store. Like, what is a common theme of those? Citrus. Sometimes you're going to see lemon scented or orange scented citrus type cleaners, right? Like, even lemon pine sol is a really good example. We track all sorts of grease in from outside and those organic compounds in from outside on the bottom of our shoes, right? So you have things like lemon pine sol. You might have like a lemon scented pledge, right? That's a situation where the essential oils and the citrus are going to come in really handy and cutting through. That's an acid. They're going to cut through to that oil. Acid and oil don't mix. They're going to help get those items off of your skin. Now, as far as when you eat a spicy food, right? Almost everybody. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Hot Ones. You might have seen on the internet, like this guy, he invites celebrities on to eat wings. They go in order from less spicy to the most spicy. The celebrities can bring whatever they want. So I've seen all sort of guests on there. They're going to bring like yogurt and ice cream. They're going to drink milk, or maybe everybody remembers that viral one chip challenge, right? Like the Pocky one chip challenge. You see people eat half a gallon of ice cream. They're chugging from a gallon of milk, right? I'm just here to say, from a science point of view, if you mix huge amounts of the acid that's in hot peppers and huge amounts of a base together, what does it cause? Let me just take you on a trip down memory lane to your volcano science project experiment when you're in like second grade, right? The baking soda and the vinegar, what happens? It erupts. So while that might make your mouth temporarily feel better or your throat temporarily feel better, I'm just here to say it causes gas bubbles. And at one point, it's going to have to come out of one end or the other. So all I'm saying is think about it scientifically, what you really want to do based on the science. When you eat something spicy, it has coated your tongue. You need a way to cut through that oily film that's on your tongue. Dairy is not going to do it. What you need is citric acid. It will burn a little bit in the moment because it's acidic, but it will help get that flavor, that hot, spicy taste, right, off of your tongue in the moment, out of your mouth. So you would want to swish around with something like a lemonade, lemon juice, orange juice, or lime juice, that acid that you need to cut through that oily enzyme. Some things might provide temporary relief, but and it's the same if you're cooking, right? Now, if you're cooking a dish, I spoke about in the flavors episode, if something gets too spicy, you can temper it, right, by using heavy cream or yogurt. That's fine for an entire dish, because what you're doing really, right, is you're spreading that spicy around so that it's perceived more slowly. But if you're in a bind and you've gotten into some crazy, spicy wing eating contest, or you have gotten a bite of food that you put some crazy out there hot sauce on, you just wanted to try a little bit, and let's say that you accidentally got it all in one bite, the thing to do is don't reach for milk. Don't ask for milk. Don't reach for things like ice cream and yogurt. What you want to do is you want to reach for something with that citric acid in it. It's the same way that they design all sorts of household cleaners with that same citric acid in mind as a really good grease cutter. It's the same properties at a chemical level, right, that Dawn dish soap has when it's cutting through the grease, or when you're using things like 409. It's the same science at play there. So if it gets my greasy dishes clean, I really believe also that it can cut through that ghost pepper chili, coated my mouth, soft palate, the roof of my mouth, the insides, like my lips, right? Like I just truly believe that it's going to work better. And it doesn't matter if I believe it or if you believe it, it's really science. I hope that today's episode has given you a little bit of insight into chilies, how they're graded, how we decide what's spicy and what isn't, how they're used. This is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just a little soundbite. You see what I did there? That was a food pun. So sorry, but not sorry. This is a little taste. Oh, I did it again. Of what's to come in the future. This is just an introduction to why is it spicy. I want to thank you so much for listening to the Food for Thoughtcast. The fans truly make us great. Please reach out on social media and tell us what your favorite spicy food is, or maybe why you don't like spicy food. If you have any questions or need any recipe advice, holler at us on social media. I hope you're having a wonderful week and that you have a great weekend. That's a wrap for today. Until the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast, make good food, eat good food, share it, and be kind to one another.
Thanks so much for listening today. You are part of what makes us special, and we are so glad you joined us. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. Just like food, delicious podcasts are better when you share them with others. Come back for seconds wherever podcasts are served, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Food for Thoughtcast or at www.foodforthoughtcast.com, where you can link to all podcast players, or you can send us an email at foodforthoughtcmc@gmail.com.